everyone, and welcome to this European Commission IEEP side event. We've got to the point of any COP where everyone is feeling dusty and tired and exhausted, and everyone is focusing on technical details of the international negotiations, and sometimes it can be difficult to remember exactly what the point of all this is. But this evening we're going to focus on what the EU will be doing to implement its Paris Agreement's commitments. And we have, I'll just put the agenda up on the screen for you. We have, first of all, Miguel Arias Cañete, the Commissioner for Energy and Climate Action. Then we'll have Giovanni La Villa, who is the Chair of the European Parliament's Environment, Consumer Protection and Public Health Committee. Unfortunately, we don't have the State Secretary from Slovakia, but we will then have a couple of responses from two parts of civil society. First, Steve Howard, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at IKEA, and IKEA's living memory, the longest serving member of the executive team at IKEA. And we also have Luebbeke from WWF Europe. Commissioner, may I invite you to take the floor?
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you all of you for coming at this late time of the day, in which we are just started negotiations at 8, so wonderful. And when I would say that at an intense and demanding year, we have really many reasons to celebrate, because 2016 has been a milestone for international climate action. The Paris Agreement has entered into force earlier than expected. When we reached agreement in Paris last year, I start thinking how long will it take for the European Union to ratify this agreement and to deposit. I would never thought it would have been possible to do it in the short time frame that we did. No? But also we have reached a historic agreement in Kigali to phase out F-gases. It was not easy at all, because there were some countries very reluctant to have any kind of movement in this area, and it took lots of effort to reach this agreement. And also we have made some strides to reduce emissions in the aviation sector through ICAO. So we have sent, with all these elements, we have sent a very clear message that the transition towards a low carbon and sustainable world is here to stay. But for sure, we cannot just live with the success of Paris, and the spirit of Paris must be kept alive. And we have to also see what we are doing to fulfill all our compromise. I really think, even if sometimes it may be criticized, that the European Union 2030 climate and energy package, what ensures is that the European Union is prepared to fulfill its commitments and also to stay ahead of the game, no? Because we have done our homework with action. Over a year ago, I came forward with a proposal to reform the European Union emissions trading system, which is the cornerstone of our 2030 climate and energy framework. Currently, the Parliament is dealing with it. In July of this year, I presented two other key elements: the national emission reduction targets in the non-emission trading sector, and a proposal on how to bring land use and forestry into the European Union 2030 efforts. And all those three proposals are currently to the European Parliament and Council for the consideration. I think the proposals strike a good balance between fairness, cost effectiveness, and environmental integrity, and they provide a basis for a swift agreement. No? The European Union has already come a long way. Sometimes we try to minimize the effort the European Union is doing. But if you compare with the rest of the world, between 1990 and 2015, we reduced our emissions by 22%, while our economy grew by 50%. It's clear that we will overachieve our 2020 targets, and we have to build on this achievement to meet our ambitious 2030 commitment, and to develop the mid-century decarbonization strategies that we have to deliver to the United Nations during 2020. Of course, the farther you go, the more challenging it becomes, and we try to be in the driving seat of the clean energy transition. By the end of the month, if nothing goes wrong, I will launch our smart and clean energy package, previously called the winter package. It changes name, but the substance is the same. Currently ongoing with all the proceedings at the Commission, the lengthy and complex ones we have, but there has three aims: to put energy efficiency first, to make European Union #1 in renewables. Many people would think we are not in the pathway, but I think we are going much more ahead than other people in this endeavor. And also, the third principle is to do so in a cost-effective way that delivers a fair deal for consumers. It's clear that the most important policy always in energy is energy efficiency. That's absolutely clear. If we take into account that for any 1% improvement in energy efficiency, we reduce gas imports by 2.6%. It's a wonderful outcome. And so any effort in energy efficiency is extremely positive. We save in 2015 $27 billion of energy imports thanks to energy efficiency alone, and a 30% target in energy efficiency instead of 27 can generate additional 70 billion euros and 400,000 jobs. Somebody will say, well, not go for 40, 50, or 65, and I see Claude Turmes' face. But for the moment, our proposal will be in the line of a 30% target, and let's see what happens in the Parliament afterwards. And for sure, we will focus on the sectors that have biggest potential, like buildings, which is an area considering the age of our buildings, which 2/3 were built before the war performance standards, and that we have renovation rates around 1%. So the challenge is big, and we have to double renovation rates and to establish financial instruments such as smart financing with smart buildings. The building sector, by the way, is one of the sectors, if we want jobs and growth, we have to add, because it accounts for 9% of European Union GDP and gives employment to 18 million people. So it's a substantial element of economic activity. For sure, we have to, and clean energy, the appetite for investment is very big in renewables in the world. And it's a very good sign that in 2015, renewables surpassed coal as the main source of our capacity, and investment in renewables is expected to grow in the next decade. This is a sector extremely important for the European Union because it employs 1.2 million people across Europe and accounts for 138 billion euros every year. In 2030, it's very clear that half of our electricity will have to come from renewables. And in 2050, it should be carbon-free. That's the challenge, you know. And now we have to prepare all the legislation needed to do so, and have electricity market with design with consumers at the center. You know? It's clear that we have to, in the new electricity market design, we have to make the grid more flexible at generation and consumer ends to foster self-generation and demand response. And we also have to have more competition in the retail markets. We have also to act in innovation and modernization. In the emission trading system, we include the creation of a modernization and innovation fund to support lower income member states in meeting the investment needs related to energy efficiency and modernization of the energy system. And already in the current European emission trading system trading period, more than 2 billion euros of funding were awarded to 38 first-of-a-kind demonstration projects in renewable energy and carbon capture and storage, covering 19 European Union members states. The investment plan for Europe, the Juncker plan, is going swiftly related to energy. We want to mobilize 350 billion euros, but I must say that most of the projects have been done in the energy and climate sector, and we also have to develop new financial instruments. Finally, we have to have a strong governance. The October Council took decisions in which there were binding targets at European level. They were not binding targets at national level. That raises a huge problem in the area of governance, and we are trying to deal with a strong governance that many people will think is not strong enough. But we think that with the help of 10-year integrated national energy and climate plans to be prepared by member states, and with the framework of governments we are going to put on the table, we will be able to fulfill our targets. For sure, we have 2030 targets at the moment, but for sure, the big challenge of the European Union will be to develop a mid-century decarbonization strategy. You will hear many interventions this week about mid-century strategies, but really developing a real mid-century decarbonization strategy is a big challenge, because you have to do a very sound economic and social impact analysis. It's not just establishing milestones and targets, it's to determine which are the sectors who will be affected, which are the measures that can be taken, which is the right timetable to do it in the most cost-efficient way, and which are all the big changes we have to do in the transport sector, in the building sector, in the generation of energy sector, is a major challenge. Probably one of the Commission has been working very hard to deliver the 2030 package, whether it's the emission trading system, whether the for sharing, whether it's all the energy-related pieces of legislation. By the end of the year, we will have delivered 85% of, nearly 90% of all the actions that were in the roadmap of the Energy Union. We will have one complex piece of legislation with CO2 emission targets of cars and light vans. It will not be easy. Not be easy, because we have the problem of e-mobility and the deployment of infrastructure, of grids, of charging points, which is complicated, because if we legislate at the European level, people will say we are intrusive. If we are not intrusive, the deployment of e-mobility will not take place. So it's a difficult balance to articulate, but we have to be ambitious. And I suppose the European Parliament will be much more ambitious, and together we can do something for e-mobility. But targets will be complicated to establish, and always politically they are difficult, because there are elections in all the relevant countries in the year. We have the French election, we have the German election, and we have a piece of legislation which touches very heavily an important industrial sector in both countries. So it will not be easy. But once we have finished with this piece of legislation that I will expect to do in 2017, all the efforts of the Commission will be concentrated on the preparation of the mid-century decarbonization strategy, which will be a major challenge. And that will require extensive analysis, extensive economic modeling, extensive discussions with the stakeholders, and finding where important political agreement among member states, European Parliament, and national parliaments. This is a strategy you have to deliver with a very close dialogue also with national parliaments that have to be associated, convinced that is the right way to go, because it will be the engine of major challenges in the economic, industrial, and social policies of member states. So probably this will be the most difficult piece of work that this Commission will have to deliver. But what I have seen this week is that everybody is thinking on this way of action, and member states are delivering some strategies. Germany has done it last week. Other countries want to do another one, but we need a general European framework, which is the right way to operate, because it's an integrated approach with common legislation, common rules, and common ambition. That is what I would say today. We are in a situation, and we are respected when people talk about climate action. They acknowledge it. If you see in the different fora we have been meeting this week, that the European Union has ambitious targets, they acknowledge that we are one of the few parties who is implementing the legislation. Because many people have iron disease, but they still don't have the national climate action plan, neither the legislation. And the good thing of the legislation, when it is enforced, approved, and published in the official journal, it remains regardless of the elections in the different member states. That's one, I would say, element of differentiation we have, and that makes our politics permanent, instead of being, like we are seeing today, exposed to big changes in the political scene. No, that's very positive. If at the same time we have solidarity with developing countries, we have present a case of responsible policies who permits us make alliances, big coalitions, and be present in the international scenario of climate change policy. And I thank all of you for listening to me in this occasion at this time of the day, which is the commitment you have to climate action, because there have been many events. And this is a little one according to European standards. According to Spanish standards, it's quite okay, but European standards in Brussels, there is nobody working at this moment. only the 13th floor.
Commissioner, thank you very much. And I now give the floor to Mr. Lavilla.
Thank you very much to the Commission for having organized this side event and in a meeting during the COP22 in which we are discussing about the implementation of the Paris Agreement. We are going to see and to spend some time for discussing our European Union's 2030 climate and energy framework. I think that it is very, very important to do it also because we are ready to implement, and I have to thank the Commissioner and the Commission for having put aside a lot of legislation or proposal for legislation that are important for implementing the Paris Agreement. And I'm going to make a short picture on the work that we are doing now. I want to underline also that we have some work to do in the next future. And I'm starting from the EU emission trading system, that is the cornerstone of the European Union's policy to combat climate change. And it is a key tool for reducing industrial greenhouse gas emission cost effectively. To meet our 2030 climate change target, the ETS must be reformed, and it is crucial that the ETS is able to reflect the Paris Agreement going forward. Discussions on the Commission's proposal, which was published in July last year, are still ongoing in the European Parliament, although we are making efforts in order to achieve a good and balanced result in the vote and to finalize our position in the coming weeks. We hope to have the final vote at the beginning of December and to give also to the Council some useful suggestions for trying to find possible agreement in a short time. We are also welcome the proposal made by the Commission for the non-ETS sectors, namely effort sharing and LULUCF, before the summer. And I believe that this draft proposal provides a very useful basis to ensure that the non-ETS sector also plays its role in combating climate change. We are starting on this file our work, and we hope to have, not in a long time, our position. But we also look forward to receiving, at the end of the month, the Commission winter package, the Commission proposal on energy efficiency, renewable energy, and bioenergy sustainability. However, we need to ensure that our ambition level is high enough on these pieces of legislation, as following the Paris Agreement, it's clear that all the sector should contribute to achieve the objective to keep the global temperature well below the 2 degrees. In particular, we think that insufficient progress has been made in greenhouse gas emission reduction in the transport sector with respect to the 2020 targets, and therefore efforts need to be scaled up in view of this sector contribution to emission reduction up to 2030. Transport is the second biggest greenhouse gas emitting sector, and therefore a range of policies aiming to lower emission from this sector, and especially from international aviation and shipping, are urgently needed. This afternoon, the European Parliament organized a very interesting and participant side event in the European Union Pavilion on emission from international aviation. And this illustrates that the importance that we attach to this issue. CORSIA, the proposal made by the ICAO, the newly established carbon offsetting scheme, is a good result, but we have already expressed our concerns as regards the timeline and the voluntary-based approach. Probably we need more. International aviation and shipping are not mentioned in the Paris Agreement, as you know, and we believe that in light of their constantly growing climate impact, insufficient action in the aviation and maritime sector at ICAO and DIMO level could jeopardize the effort being made by other sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, given the current global situation and the last news from the United States, that is in front of us, and we cannot ignore it, the European Union needs to lead by example today more than ever. We are well on track to overachieve our 2020 target for greenhouse gas emission reduction and to meet our 2020 target for renewable energy. However, more can be done. We need more ambition and action in order to maintain sufficient incentives for EU's 2050 climate target. But we need a global effort. Our leadership should still be able to guarantee the protection of our industry competitiveness and be a push for innovation. In other words, this ambition should also be seen as an economic opportunity for green jobs and growth. To conclude, I am convinced that more ambition on climate change represents a win-win option for our environment, our climate, and our economy. And we are here in Marrakesh to testify it and to work for translating this word into action at international level, but we have to work also at the European level. And today we are here for testifying, for showing outside that we are ready to cooperate with the Commission and the Council for achieving this target. Thank you.
Mr. Lavia, thank you very much. We're now going to have the short responses from Steve Howard and Imke Luebbeke, and then I think we have time for a few questions to the Commissioner before he has to leave, but we will then be able, if people are still interested, we'll be able to continue the discussion with the rest of the panelists thereafter. Okay, so Steve.
Right, I think it's good to have you here, and I think European leadership was important and is important and will remain really important given recent developments. And just some thoughts from the business community. So I also co-chair We Mean Business, and we've seen since Paris, the business community really step up, and this is multi-sectoral, it's deep commitments now, it's a topic in the board level, it's been normalized that business sees decarbonisation as the way forwards and welcomes a comprehensive response from policymakers. We want policy certainty, we want policy that's long, loud and legal, and the business community on the whole will be completely with you in that, Commissioner. So we're ready to mobilize in your support. And that's whether it's well-designed regulation, appropriate incentives, or carbon pricing or taxing. It's not often you'll get the business community to say that they'll welcome even taxation. There's been now nearly 500 businesses have also made 1,000 commitments of their own. If you scale those up, actually they deliver almost 60% of the required reductions from the business community. Then to give you some illustrations from IKEA just very quickly and how we see this, and I think there are some lessons for policy on this. We've gone for rapid transformation of large areas of our business. So we're now 71% renewably powered with wind farms. We own wind farms in 10 countries, including several European countries. We've turned energy from a cost into a profit center. We'll be 100% renewably powered by 2020 from the investments we've made. We found actually from a recent analysis in Poland, we've got 6 wind farms in Poland, that actually the economic benefit is 1.6 alongside the investments of the wind farms themselves. It's a net job creator. The farmers, instead of just farming potatoes and cabbages, they're farming electrons. The local community leverages additional tax revenue from it. It's a win-win-win. So we've set aggressive 100% targets. The other thing is using this as a driver of innovation. With our lighting, we used to sell halogens and CFLs just a few years ago, and many lights. We said we'd go all in, that by September 2015, we'd only sell LEDs. We've now committed by 2020, we'll sell 500 million LEDs. About 350 million of those will be in Europe. That's equivalent to saving all the household energy of 2 large European cities every year. And that's driven growth. We've seen an 85% reduction in the price of LEDs within 4 years by using it as an innovation challenge. And this is my last point, really. I think if we look at the improvements in price, of solar, of energy storage, of wind power, of energy efficiency technologies. It's breathtaking when we really drive it at scale. We can see solar is going to decrease probably another 30% in the next 2 to 3 years. We're going to have incredibly cheap energy, almost free electrons, if we play it forwards by 2030. Electric vehicles will become dominant in the same sort of time frame. If we think we've not even had the 10th anniversary of the iPhone yet, so 2030 is 13 years away. EVs and AVs will totally dominate the market faster than anticipated. So if we can drive this with bold targets, and let's say, I don't think we need to wait till 2050 to go. I think it's the overall plan's fantastic, but we can go faster. You know, we can flip the energy sector. We can be 100% renewable by 2030 or shortly thereafter. We could go. We could take all of our major cities to be EV only in this sort of time frame. We could have a breathtaking energy efficiency. And I think we look at this as this is about our industrial strategy, our job strategy, our economic strategy, and saving the planet strategy. So you have all the support from the business community. Be bold, go all in, and we're with you.
Thank you, Steve. Imke. I think it will.
Okay.
I think it works.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for the invitation. I think I'm just astonished about the statement and happy to hear that, and really a good place to be to see the amazing support. I think it leaves some space for me to point out where we think better leadership on the current legislative files can be shown. I think yeah, we think the EU has been a leader the past years for a long time, in particular on delivering ambitious and really good frameworks. We've seen that on many climate files, but also on the renewable side. And by just having all these files on the climate side and energy again on the table, we get the impression that the Commission is almost ruin very good starts and very good frameworks which are currently in place and which could be improved rather than weakening them. And I'm listing some examples where we would like to see stronger leadership and stronger commitment to a direction from the Commission. One is on the ETS, emissions trading scheme. I think the EU invented the emissions trading scheme, and it's very innovative and can be an ambitious instrument. What happened in the past is a huge oversupply of allowances to the market and a lot of free allocations. And actually, this smart instrument hasn't driven real change. It hasn't driven coal out of the market as it should have done already. And the risk we are currently facing is that we get this a second time with the current reform. Again, discussing handing out allowances for free on a large scale and not ensuring that we get allowances auctioned and creating revenues also to finance the energy transition. I think this is a crucial point, and this is about the credibility. Commissioner, you mentioned yourself, this is at the heart, one of the cornerstones of the climate policy. How can we move forward if the push and the drive of this instrument is not secured? And currently, it doesn't look very good with the plans to hand out more free allowances. So we think the polluters need to pay. While saying this, I think we need put at the same time more attention on how can we help industries and people to adapt to the situation that some industries or some areas face a higher burden. So this is the other side of the story. But I think the compromise can't lead to a weak price signal and to basically undermining what we think needs clear direction and leadership. The second point is we have good, which is a very good point. We have 2020 emissions reductions targets, and we have a 2030 emissions reduction target. But the effort sharing proposal, so the non-ETS proposal, basically was born with a lot of possibilities to delay action, or to go away with undermining the efforts. So we think this proposal should go through the stringent as possible. Otherwise, we are not up to 40% reduction, and it's a way of undermining also the efforts needed to stay to the well below 2 degrees target, because we are far from discussing the 1.5 target. The other thing is the Commission has very good modeling and a very high standard of modeling impacts of policies. But what we see is that the benefits, the gains, are not sufficiently taken into account. The focus remains on the perceived costs of measures. For example, the proposal from the European Parliament to move to a 40% of energy efficiency target shows that we have huge job creation. 2.6 million jobs in energy efficiency. This is not properly taken into account, and is not really, there's a mismatch between the actions proposed by the Commission and what their own modeling shows. As we think Paris is a call of urgency and action. The latest UN emissions gap report shows clearly there's no reason to wait for any action. The winter package, which is very important for this urgency and action agenda, and really locks in a lot up to 2030, has, from at least what we've heard, some really hard points on the side which we think should be promoted, meaning renewable energy. It has clear, very, very strong weaknesses there. You mentioned yourself the problem around the governance system. We think it's stepping back from a successful system, having national targets and real commitments. At least we think we need benchmarks to be able to have a governance system taking member states' account to deliver the target. And we think it would be really a step back from what we currently have in place. Going beyond that is not a problem, but I think there is a huge risk that we do not send a strong investment signal. It also is for us a lack of clear direction that capacity payments still are possible and actually are not under scrutiny. I think investing into capacity of coal and gas up to 2030 is a problem, and we are risking having stranded assets. We need to invest into coal, gas, and infrastructure with great care. And I think it also provides us with the security that the energy transition is as cost effective as possible. Because I think the biggest waste of money is really building up plants which we know we shouldn't use aiming to reach the Paris Agreement. So this leaves me just with a call to have and to launch a package as strong and as credible as possible, and to build on the strong leadership and really good work the Commission has done over the past decade. Thanks.
Thank you, Imke. What I suggest we do before the Commissioner has to dash away is we take 3 questions. What I'm going to do is invite people to be very brief in their questions. So anything that sounds like a long speech, I will cut you off and move on to the next questioner.
How great.
And because I think we want to make sure that we get as much out of the Commissioner's time as we can. So if you could, first of all, introduce yourselves and say which organization you're from. So we have a gentleman over there, and then a gentleman towards the left, and a gentleman in the middle here, and then we'll move on in the next round of questions to Mr. Termes. Okay, so it's the, actually, if we start with that, the gentleman just there, and then move on to the gentleman with the moustache.
Good evening. My name is Heinz Koppetz. I'm from the World Bioenergy Association. Thank you very much for the opportunity to have this possibility to talk to the commissioner. My main question is the following. Do you believe that the EU targets 2030 minus 40% emissions and 27% renewables comply with the targets of the Agreement of Paris? And our calculations say no, because we see already now the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere is increasing alarmingly. We have 404, 405 ppm. And the question is not to reduce step-by-step the emissions, but to stabilize the concentration in the atmosphere. And this would mean we should stop using fossil fuels before 2030. So my question now, the second one part would be, as the targets do not comply with Paris, but I understand the political constraints, always the slowest are defining the progress. Wouldn't it be possible that the Commission says our targets, minus 40 plus 72, are minimum targets, and the member states are invited, encouraged to do much more than the European level is defining?
Okay, thank you. And then the gentleman with the moustache there.
Yeah, also thank you for the opportunity. Adam Pavlov from Greenpeace. So a couple of questions. The first thing, I think the UNEP GAP report shows quite clearly that the EU 2030 targets are not in line with 1.5. And in that context, we're very worried that the EU is not willing to talk about this topic of enhanced INDCs as part of the Facilitative Dialogue 2018. So perhaps a response on that. And the second question would be on renewables. I mean, the renewables targets in the winter package are barely above business as usual on the one hand. On the other hand, we have a complete absence of nationally binding targets. We talk about, or you talk about being in the driving seat of the clean energy transition. I think any look at Bloomberg reports over the last few years shows that the EU clearly isn't in the driving seat on renewables anymore. And yeah, would the Commissioner please respond to that? Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you. And a question from the gentleman here.
Yes, my name is Alfred Schwartz. I come from Brazil. And I just attended a meeting where the BioFuture platform was launched. It's a platform for the development of biofuels, bioenergy, and it has the support of a number of European member countries. Okay, my question is, what will be the role of biofuels in the goals of the European Union? Because I seldom can hear any specifics about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have three questions. I'll ask the Commissioner to respond first, then Mr. Lavilla, and then Stephen Dimka may want to contribute as well. In the meantime, I realize that the Commissioner may need to run away. I was told he wouldn't be able to answer questions. I wouldn't have time, but he's very kind.
I'm running to every one meeting to another, but I tend to arrive 5 minutes late to all of them.
Okay,
no problem.
It's
a rolling delay. No, first question. See, when we start talking about the Paris Agreement, it was pretty clear that it will be a much different agreement from the Kyoto Protocol. It was impossible to go for a binding agreement with binding targets because it will not fly. I saw it from the very beginning in Warsaw. It was absolutely clear in Doha, in Lima. It was very clear that it was none of it. But on the other side, the design of the agreement was something like Kyoto, with a fixed date, 2030, at the beginning when we started. And from the very beginning, we designed the system of INDCs. The European Union saw very clearly that if you went for a 2030 agreement with the INDCs that currently were flowing from member states and the commitments on the table, it will never be enough to cope with global warming. And we know that's why we designed the ambition mechanism, and the European Union is responsible for that. I had a conference, I remember, after taking office in New York in 2014, and I say in that days in New York, we will not be on track for the 2 degrees of, with the INDCs that will be on the table. And Paris cannot be a fixed agreement, must be a dynamic agreement to raise ambition over time. At that time, people thought I was mad. But the mechanism that we designed, and my people in climate started thinking and shaping this kind of dynamic thing with stock taking every 5 years, we had to convince many people who were opposing it. Nonetheless, some powerful emitters who were absolutely against this kind of dynamic agreement. So it's pretty clear that INDCs are not enough to cope with global warming. We make an INDC meeting in Rabat before the COP in Paris, and we knew from the very beginning that there was a gap. The problem is we have to fill the gap. The sooner the better along the century, and that's why we try to do, and that's why we introduce, in addition to the INDCs, the idea of the mid-century strategies. So we were introducing elements to arrive there. And it's pretty clear that our target of at least 40% doesn't solve the world problem. And it's the most ambitious target of all the INDCs on the table. Ours is not enough, but the rest of the world is neither enough. And that's why we will have the facilitative dialogue in 2018, the real stock taking in 2023, and then the process of raising ambition. Some people will be able to raise ambition before, and some people will be able to raise ambition later. I am very pragmatic. And what I want is that the at least 40%, which is not 40%, is at least, and with domestic action, without using clean development mechanism, which is a big difference from Kyoto. I was Minister of Environment in the country I know best. And when I arrived to my office, I discovered that my own country was fulfilling the Kyoto things, buying clean development mechanisms all over the world. But that's not the way to operate. And that's why we wanted that our INDC was with internal action only, at least. We can go farther away, probably. Possibly, if we went farther away, we can use clean development mechanisms if we develop a reasonable, transparent, and clear market mechanism in the future, which has not been always been the case. No, so that's the reality, and nobody prevents member states to be more ambitious. But I can tell you the reality. I have spent a whole year traveling to the 28 member states to convince them to be more ambitious and to go for 40%, at least all of them, or being even more than 40% if they wanted. Well, the reality is the reality. Nobody wanted to be absolutely overachieving from the targets the Commission was assigning. I heard President Hollande yesterday say 40% for the first time, but I have negotiated with the French authorities their target. It was not easy. No, it was because it was. So nobody prevents other people to be more ambitious. But the role of the Commission is at least to establish the reasonable framework to make sure that the at least 40% is achieved within the time framework. For sure, there must be revision clauses, because if we raise the level of ambition, we have to reinforce the legislation and be much more ambitious. And for sure, the European Parliament has also a role in this exercise, because now you are amending our regulations, and we have our common markets who may work or not work, but you can also reduce increase the reduction of the cap. And you can do many things in all the legislation, or raise your targets and so on. We had a big problem to develop the legislation, which is that the European Council in October 2014 was too prescriptive and too detailed in the decisions they take. If you see the decisions of the European Council, usually they are vague. If you see the October 2014, they are extremely precise and allow less margin to the Commission to make proposals. And when you make a proposal, say, oh, you are against the European Council. Well, we try to be as ambitious as we can, but pragmatic and realistic. For sure, that's the first thing that we want to do. It's very clear. There was a question of on renewables, we're ambitious or not ambitious. It's very clear that when you are the leader and you are start developing the renewables, at the very beginning you are the only country who develops them, and you are ahead of the world. Then the rest of the world, because the technology develops and the price is lower, and there have been interventions who have said, which is the rest of it, they have easy access to cheaper energy. You don't have to have feed-in tariffs or credit tax credits, and you access to the technology in much more better conditions because the learning curve has been paid by the European Union. But even so, the figure important is the per capita, the incidence per capita renewal. And there, the European Union is very far ahead. For sure, now we have to have the framework to develop the possibility. And we have also another limit for development of renewables, is the lack of interconnections. It's pretty difficult to have big deployment of renewables if we don't have interconnections. And this is not only a problem of the Baltics, which, by the way, are synchronized with Russia still at the moment, or the Iberian Peninsula, which is not synchronized with France, which is not connected with France, very limited capabilities, less than 2.5% of the installed capacity. And now we are seeing the problems. Now there are problems in France because many of the nuclear plants are not producing energy at the moment, and they are importing energy all over the place at outrageous prices, but they cannot import renewables from Spain or Morocco because the interconnections are not developed. So the first policy of the Commission is let's develop interconnections, let's have agreed fit for renewables, and let's do all the elements to make renewables. And it's not only a problem of Mediterranean countries, it's a problem in Germany. They have the offshore production in the north, they have the industry in the south, but they don't have power lines because it's politically extremely complicated. So we have many contradictions within the European Union. Come back to the biofuels. So we will try to deliver the more ambitious renewable schemes so that we continue to be leaders. We are leaders in patents, we are leaders in technology. Our companies are doing very well. For sure, they are also investing abroad, and that's very positive for the climate action that our companies are very active. You are in Morocco, what's Assad? I don't know you want to see it or didn't go to see it. No. It's we're going. Sorry, it's an impressive exercise. So, and then biofuels. For sure, all the sectors have to contribute to bioenergy. Have to contribute to our climate target goals, and the transport sector also, and the heating and cooling sector also. So when biofuels, there's an opportunity, but here we have the debate of what happens with land use change and first generation biofuels, and how we develop second generation and third generation biofuels, and how we phase out first generation and phase in advanced biofuels. So that's the debate, and how we introduce sustainability criteria by biomass, and how we improve the use of biomass in the heating and cooling. So there is a big role, because the transport sector and the heating and cooling sector are absolutely crucial in this evolution. I must tell you, this with the package or under the name clean, and I don't know the last name, because the jumbo package is extremely complex because everything is interlinked. And somebody said the modeling is good, but you don't follow your modeling. We try to follow our modeling, impact assessment, and we have to pick and choose those options which are more cost efficient, and we are more sure that we will have full support, because you say business is also in favor sometimes. Sometimes there are businesses we don't like. We speak about carbon leakage.
We'll always find you some businesses that support.
Yes, for sure. But as I am blamed because I meet with everybody who go to knocks my door. I'm blamed for meeting with lots of business, and I can tell you that there are all kinds of opinions in this world. No, you find many contradictions sometimes, but we try to put an ambitious package. It's a complicated one, and it's a package which for sure will be very much improved in the parliamentary discussions. I am pretty sure the European Parliament has a major role to improve this package. And the Commission will act as a honest broker in this evolution of the package in the future. I'll do my best, Don Anchiti, but I'm sure, Mr. Lavia, that you do your best, that the outcome, the final product, is important. The important thing is the final product. It will take 2 years to deliver. It's going to be complicated. Some people will ask the European Council to come again along, and we have to have a co-decision procedure as it is, balanced and ambitious. So I have all my confidence that I will arrive not 5 minutes late, but 15 minutes late, but the European Parliament will do a good job. We will try to improve our actual regulations, to have a stable regulatory framework, to eliminate retroactive changes that hamper confidence in the framework, and to try to deliver on our targets. And as I told you, and we will start all the work needed to prepare a very ambitious mid-century strategy, because the actual 2050 roadmap that we have clearly is not adapted to the objectives we established in Paris. Thank you so much.
Commissioner, thank you very much. Mr. Lavia, that sounded to me like an open invitation from the Commission to the Parliament to play a full, active and ambitious role.
See, he already was on track.
It is clear that the Parliament as co-legislator have an important role in the process, and we are ready to be ambitious and to support the proposal of the Commission. As you know, sometimes, yes, as you know, sometimes we are going to improve your proposal and later we are going to fight with the Council. But okay, it is our role, and we have to take the role and to work for this. I'm going back to something mentioned before by the Commissioner. On some topics, we are going to be ambitious, more ambitious than the Commission. On other topics, I don't know, because I have not read the winter package, and we are waiting for the winter package, but winter is starting, but we have not received nothing, and we are not going to read by some site on internet. And then we have to wait for the final package. It is clear that on effort sharing, we have to solve some problems that are in front of us for achieving a good result, for having a balanced approach in the Council. But also on ETS, we need something more, because as you know, it is not so easy to achieve the final result. We have free allowance needed by some industries, but we need also to involve the aviation sector. In the, as mentioned before, in the proposal coming from ICAO, we are not going to see enough ambition. We are not going to see good timing. Voluntary basis, it is probably not the best option for achieving ambitious result. But we know well that we have to do more, because with the actual NDC, we are not going to achieve the result that we want to achieve. And then we have to continue our work, not only at the European level, but also in the international negotiation. And we are ready as European Parliament to support the Council, but especially the Commission, for making a good deal and ambitious deal, because we want to live in a planet in good condition, and probably we have to do more for the next and in the next future.
Thank you. Imco, we've had a couple of questions which, I guess, to some extent echoed the points that you were making in your initial intervention. Is there anything you want to add in response to them?
Yeah, maybe on the side of the use of biofuels in the transport sector. Actually, we think the Commission made quite a mistake last time in supporting the first generation biofuels. So we hope they stick to their commitment to phase them out and put their efforts in electrification of transport and advancing on that, rather than betting on first generation biofuels. We know there is from the greenhouse gas saving side, there are huge problems, but also related to land use, availability of land, and other social aspects related to that. So we are not convinced this is a solution for Europe. We hope the Commission is phasing out the support for first generation biofuels. And I think there is some room for some second generation biofuels maybe, but also this needs to be assessed in terms of the sustainability limits of that. We think also the biomass we have, we need to be careful. This is a limited resource. and we need to think careful about in which sectors they can be supported. And the use for transportation, as said, there is some room for advanced biofuels we see, but definitely in using biomass to produce electricity, we don't see that as a sustainable option, in particular as it doesn't really lead to greenhouse gas savings rather than to an increase of greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you. Steve?
Just a thought, really. I think for the Commissioner's gone, but from a Parliament point of view, that the businesses that, overwhelmingly, I think, certainly the sort of forward-thinking businesses are on the side of climate action now. The businesses that aren't, I think they only deserve a seat at the table if they have a credible plan. It's not a credible plan to say we can't do it or don't move ahead. That's not a credible plan, and they don't deserve to be listened to. And I think, you can see a change through history. They've always been people that have resisted change and fought change, and we don't have the time for that. So I think businesses that, and some sectors, it is difficult. There are difficult transitions for some sectors. So I'm sympathetic to those sectors, but they only, for me, at this point in time, with the urgency we have, they only deserve a place at the table if they're serious about decarbonising at pace and at scale, and if they're prepared to engage constructively in ways to do that. Otherwise, close the door on them. And I think civil society would support you and the rest of the business community would. Then just in terms of the options around biofuels and biomaterials, we use lots of biomaterials, use wood. It's one of the oldest biomaterials. We forget sometimes that we think about we have to do something novel. We turn them into tables and bookshelves. We have things like cotton as well. But in terms of more novel new biomaterials and biofuels, I think if you're very thoughtful about the sourcing and about the life cycle analysis, there's some great options there. We did the first, I think it was perhaps the world's first PPA. For those of you into energy, you might think that's a power purchase agreement, but this was a plastic purchase agreement. This was to enable a company called New Light that actually has a technology to turn landfill gas into plastic to scale its first commercial plant. They can also do CO2 direct to plastic from air plastic, basically. There's some with some thoughtful approaches. There's some fantastic opportunities, and we've identified we actually have some residual wood waste. We're very efficient in the way we use wood, but we have residual wood waste. We use some of that. We pelletize it for use as biofuel. We use it actually to power the industry group, the IKEA industry group as well. Many of the factories, with some with cogen. And it's a really good use of residual, otherwise waste material. But we're also looking at innovative ways where we can actually turn that into plastic as well. There are routes through to that. It's just coming up with a cost-effective way of doing it. So, and this comes back to where there is a will, there is a way, and having strong, firm targets. So I think go in the Parliament, put pressure. This is an innovation opportunity. This is about job creation, innovation, and the future of European industry.
Okay, so if there's enough clarity on the direction, business will follow.
Yes, we'll do our best anyway, but clarity helps, and bold targets help even further.
Right. Now, I know we have a question or comment from Claude Turmes, MEP, just here. If we have a microphone for him. Does anyone else have any questions they would like to raise? Okay, we have a gentleman here, and then a return visit from the gentleman back at the left there. Okay, Claude.
Okay, so I'm Claude Thomas, member of European Parliament. It's a pity that the commissioner left. I like him, especially because he takes critique very sportive in a certain way. So he's a great sparring partner.
ICAO is just intervening at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's they are always intervening in the important moment. So what I didn't like, however, about his statement is it's not Parliament who is the only responsible in this game. Commission has 10 days to correct some major errors in their actual drafting. Error number one, capacity payments for new coal. And maybe a question to Imke. Does WWF, do you like to have new subsidies for new coal power stations? And what will be the impact on carbon lock-in and our long-term strategy? And the second issue is, and that's a question to you, you want to go to sell PV to self-producing customers. Are you aware that in the actual proposal of Commission, they are in one directive saying energy citizens, energy citizens, energy citizens, and in the other piece, in the electricity regulations, they are saying no obligation whatsoever for any government to give priority access and dispatch for energy citizens, which means you as IKEA, you will have maybe a market in Denmark, but if Poland doesn't want to do anything, they will not be obliged. If Spain doesn't want to do anything, so give me a bit of a feeling, do you want the European market for self-production? And the other thing is, be aware, you will not source any renewables from Portugal for your French IKEA, because if there is no national priority dispatch, there is no cross-border priority dispatch. So look at the piece, and we will have to move Commission in the next 10 days. That's our challenge. And last message is, I want a positive story for Europe. And one thing which I don't like is this statement of EU ETS as the core of the European policy, cornerstone. If you, over the last 10 years, have realized 5% of the performance of everything, are you then a cornerstone? ETS is a failed state. Failed state. 95% of all climate investments is eco-design, labeling directive, near zero energy houses, energy efficiency directive, CO2 and cars, and the renewable directive. That's the sixth legislation, 95% of all. So let's stop speaking about EU ETS being the middle of our fight or the middle of our instrument. It's the biggest failure of all our climate instruments. I want to improve them, but I promise you, and I like your statement, you want policy which is long, loud, and legal. That's exactly what we can achieve in renewable directives, in energy efficiency. So help us to get Commission to improve its thing over the next 10 days, because that is about a positive investment climate for Europe. And then what will happen? If Trump goes mad, the startups from California will come to Europe if we are able to create now the right environment. That's the success story I want for Europe.
Okay. Thank you. The gentleman just here. Okay.
Thank you. Bernardo Sala from the EU-funded project Clima South. We work with the southern Mediterranean countries. My question is probably for the gentleman for IKEA. Fantastic job you've done. I mean, the remarks, the results you have achieved are definitely very remarkable. But maybe you have the size, the critical mass, and the capacities to do this kind of investment in renewables. And what would you be your advice for a smaller or a much smaller business to go in that direction? Thanks.
Okay, an interesting question. And the gentleman at the back.
Okay, concerning this discussion between my name is Koppetz, Bioenergy Association, the discussion between biofuels for transport and electricity. We much favor e-electricity. We made the calculation in Austria how much it can contribute to reduce our emissions by 2030. And my question to the lady is, did you ever calculate how much can be the contribution of e-mobility by 2030 to reduce CO2 emissions in the European transport sector? Because then you can see what's the potential and how really we need in the next 10, 15 years biofuels also to reduce the emissions. This is my opinion. And the second point concerning Claude Thomas, I completely agree. In our opinion, in our association, we are convinced the ETS system is a failure, and it's much better to go for carbon taxes. We see this in Sweden. They have a high carbon taxes, and they really have a complete transformation of the energy system.
Okay, thank you. So we had one specific question directed to Steve on small businesses and what they should be doing.
Yeah, I think I should respond as well on the policy question. Really, we've looked around. We hope to roll out solar retailing more quickly, actually, because we found that I've done customer visits of people that have bought solar from IKEA, and they're really happy. You know, people have turned their roof into a power station. They talk to the neighbors about it. They can see the saving. They know how much their energy they're generating. There's a huge amount of pride, and they're very happy customers. And we'd like more happy customers like that. And it's many markets are dysfunctional, and there's real barriers to doing that. And we won't put solar for sale in a store. There's no point doing it if it's not of no interest to a customer because of those barriers. So we've had dialogue with some of the national governments as a result of that. And we'd love to push that more and more, because everybody that has a roof should be able to turn it into a power station. The more interconnected the market in all ways, the better, obviously, for a highly functional renewable market. So on that point as well, I think, yes, the more, both from a policy point of view and a physical interconnectedness, that would also be a good thing. My colleague from Brussels, Katarina Marskant, is just there, and I'm sure will be up for vigorously following up there. She's nodding and waving a hand enthusiastically to look at what we can do. I know the time frame is really tight on this, but we're keen to have that. In terms of the what for small and medium-sized businesses, I think it's not always easy, depending on the capacity, but sometimes the decision making can be easier, and you can look at the projects. I think start with energy efficiency, and there are frequently more and more financial institutions that are prepared to support on this sort of thing. Do the energy efficiency. There's never a bad time to invest in energy efficiency. And then if you're in the right market, renewables again have great opportunities to invest in. And I think it's just do it, look to partners, look around, and decide to prioritize it. There are ancillary benefits. There's benefits that come not just from doing the project itself. And then the other advantage, if you look at a lot of innovation in society, innovation comes frequently from smaller businesses, from small-scale entrepreneurs. And if you think of this is a radical decarbonization. We talk a lot about energy. We don't talk much about agriculture, the built environment, the other areas where there are huge opportunities. So to the entrepreneurs and the innovators in Europe, look at this as a fantastic opportunities to build new businesses. Take it as an innovation challenge, and then we'll be surprised and delighted by what happens.
Thank you, Steve. Now we have just a few minutes left. Imke or Mr. Luebbeke, were there any points that you wanted to add in response to those questions?
Yeah, just on the coal point, which Claude brought up, I think it's great that some member states already decided to move out of coal, like the UK, to end coal use in the UK by 25, as well as Netherlands, other countries looking into that. And I think that's really the right way to go, and probably that's our dirtiest energy source. This needs to be taken out of our energy mix, and seems possible. So yes, this investing in that by creating capacity markets which support coal power is definitely the wrong way to go. And I made the point in my first intervention that we think capacity payments really need to be assessed very, very carefully once for what they are given, and how long they are given, and based on what energy sources, to make them compatible with our commitment to reduce emissions. Yeah.
Okay, great. Mr. Luebbeke, was there anything you wanted to add? Or?
Only to say that the European Parliament, it is one of the co-legislators, but on the other side we have a council. And as you know, during the legislative process, we start from the proposal from the Commission. We have one reading in the Parliament and one reading in the Council, and later we start to discuss. The last discussion in the trialogue, it is not always very simple, and sometimes if you want to make one step, you have to leave something. This is a real problem, and we need also that the civil society, that European citizens make pressure on their government, because We need also the ambition in the council for achieving better result in terms of environment. Sometimes we are obliged to not to force and for closing the agreement to leave something on the table. This is the message that I leave to you, because the civil society have to work for making pressure on their government, because we need to do more, but for doing more, we need also a good effort from the council side.
Okay, thank you very much. As someone who spent most of my career working in negotiations in the council side, I entirely agree with what you just said. And one of the things I learned was that it's always a bad idea to let the European Council set too much detail in its conclusions. So I was very struck by what the Commissioner said there about the October 2014 conclusion. There's a very good reason why the treaty doesn't allow that to happen. So anyway, enough from me. Thank you very much to the panelists for a really interesting discussion. Thank you very much to everyone for coming along late in the evening to attend. And there is. And we even have some refreshments for you. Okay.
Not a bad idea at this point of time.
Thank you very much.
We have a lot of.
Yeah, that's true. Everybody's running. But actually, nice. I think some